Welcome, everybody, to episode 2 of Making Healthy Easy, the Callow podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Will Buxton. He is the 60th Buxton to attend Harrow. He trained at Guy's, King's and St. Thomas's Medical School, managed to pass the FRCA, one of the hardest exams in medicine, serving military officer with the British Armed Forces. He's had tours in Afghanistan and other places, seconded to the Special Forces. He's the co-founder of Effect Doctors, which have clinics all around the world. He's also the descendant of Thomas Buxton, the man who ended slavery in the British Empire, quite a claim to fame. He is the heir of the Truman, Hanbury and Buxton breweries, which were the largest breweries in the world at one stage. And he's a consultant anaesthetist at King's College Hospital. And, of course, a Callow customer. Welcome to the podcast, Will.
Thank you very much, Casper. Lovely to be here.
If you could give everyone in the UK one blood test they've probably never had and one habit that they should start tomorrow, what would those two things be?
I'm so naughty, I'm not going to answer your question, but I'm going to say my favourite blood test, the most interesting blood test, I think, and it really applies mainly to only 50% of the population, and that's ferritin for women. About 10 to 30% of women are iron deficient, and ferritin is the marker of your stores of iron in your blood. And if you have low iron, then you can't make enough hemoglobin, which is what carries oxygen around your body, and therefore a whole series of sequelae occur, including feeling short of breath all the time because you're not carrying enough oxygen around your body. Your hair starts to thin or fall out. You have low energy. Often you have low mood. It's linked to depression. So to answer your question about the blood test everyone should ask their GP to do for them is, what's my ferritin level? And if your ferritin's under 30, then you're severely iron deficient and you should be taking oral tablets or in some certain cases doing IV iron, which you might do, once a year or once every 2 years if you're constantly low iron, and as part of that, you might want to do there's a few other blood tests you might want to do, but that's the kind of main one. I was going to say you want to do your hemoglobin too to see if you're iron deficient anemia. That's what you've got. And
this might sound like an obvious question, but why are women predisposed to this?
So women, this tends to be women of menstruating age. So every single month they lose, a bit of blood, and because you lose blood, you need to replace that blood. And every molecule of hemoglobin needs 4 molecules of iron to make it. So you just drink through your iron stores. So women of menstruating age need 18 milligrams of elemental iron per day, whereas men or people who do not menstruate, including postmenopausal women, etc., need 8 milligrams of elemental iron per day. This is just a kind of on average, based on an average weighted woman or an average weighted man, etc.
Can I ask a really dumb question, which we might cut out because it might be so dumb? When we say iron and we say an iron transfusion or we say an iron tablet, are we literally talking about like pulled out of the ground iron or turned into something synthesized? What
no,
is
not
iron?
A dumb question. So it's not an iron transfusion; it's an iron infusion. It's
Okay,
quite common because a transfusion is coming from another person's body. That's a blood transfusion. But there's a good learning point because lots of people say iron transfusion. And then in terms of iron, it's synthetic. It's made in a lab. The iron that you get if you get it IV.
So it's not even a derivative of.
Well, it's iron, but it's made. It's like it's not just you don't kind of get an iron ore block and melt it down and give it into your vein like that.
Okay, got it. Super interesting. And I actually had my blood work done last year. I know it's something you're a big proponent of, is people should do a full MOT each year. And I came back with high ferritin. And then doing a bit more research on that turned out to be high red meat diet, or it also had something to do with, and maybe you can explain this, and I'm being selfish here and just getting some information for free, but like it also came back that it could have something to do with overdosing on vitamin C or taking too much vitamin C. Is that correct?
Well, you need vitamin C in order to absorb iron in your gut. So potentially, in theory, if you had a really iron-rich diet and you had loads of vitamin C, then you'd absorb more than you need potentially. But probably, I think that's unlikely.
Got it.
Really, probably the reason why you had an elevated ferritin was because you had some kind of inflammation or potentially an infection that was going on at the same time. Because because ferritin isn't just a marker of your stores of iron; it's also an inflammatory marker. So,
but there they also came back to say it could be due to doing like kind of CrossFit or really intensive exercise,
which would cause inflammation. Yeah. So the reason why when we talked about iron earlier, I said and some other blood tests is because at the same time as you're doing a ferritin on someone, you should really also do a CRP, which is the C-reactive protein. It's an inflammatory marker, and if your CRP is elevated and your ferritin is elevated, then you might discount the ferritin results. So you might have a normal ferritin, but with a raised CRP, which might mean that you still have iron deficiency.
Got it.
Yeah,
got it.
And that's called a functional iron deficiency. And
Fine.
so then there's a few more blood tests you do, and there's other things like transferrin saturation. And total iron binding capacity, which you do as a blood test, which would help to add into that picture of diagnosing a functional iron deficiency with a normal ferritin.
So you obviously see people at all stages of the medical life. Some of them are optimizing, and some of them, unfortunately, might be very close to the end. What's the most common thing people say they wish they'd done differently with their health when it's almost too late?
When I was a junior doctor, I worked on a respiratory ward, and it's so sad how smoking destroys your lungs and completely incapacitates you if you require, for example, home oxygen to get around, and you're constantly short of breath. And imagine being short of breath all of the time. And actually, so just based on my own experience in medicine, and particularly that 3 months I spent on a respiratory ward, it's not to smoke cigarettes, which will destroy your lungs. And if you smoke a lot of cigarettes, then they'll really destroy your lungs. And you not only have a risk of cancer, but be short of breath the entire time and feel absolutely terrible and die young. And so smoking, I'd say.
Great answer. I think it's true that life expectancy globally increased once people started cutting down on smoking. I think it was one of the biggest corollaries to the increases in global life expectancy. Just kind of leading off for that, what's one health habit that you've adopted personally from the longevity research that you think everybody could steal or start doing?
So I started taking creatine in the last kind of 2 years just because of evidence that I didn't discover it, sorry, evidence that I came across about its effect on your brain. I mean, I work out, I do weights, etc. And in the past, when I was trying to on op massive, as we call it in the army, I'd take my creatine.
What's op massive?
Op massive, where you get massive when you're on an operational tour. I'd take creatine, and then I kind of was like, well, I'm not that interested in being, absolutely huge. So whatever, so I stopped. But then I learned about its effect on reducing cognitive decline. Potentially, it has a role in reducing the incidence of Alzheimer's. Potentially, it has a role of increasing your cognitive function, even from only a few weeks of taking it. So I now take 5 grams of creatine a day. Although I will tell you, I went through a bit of a painful period when overload creatine went bust, and I realised that for about 12 months I'd been taking overload creatine, which was some sweeties at the time.
I think it had less than a gram per gummy.
No, it had in some of them 0.03 grams of creatine, and I was shocked that they conned me for so long.
I think that story, which James Smith brought out, who's been a Kello customer too, and he really brought that whole thing to life. But I think in a way it did a lot of good things for the industry. I think it's increased rigor of brands going away and saying we need to get things tested.
100%.
In all honesty, we already were doing a decent level of sending our meals away to test the macronutrients in them. But that coming to fore really made me go back to our nutritionists and say, what do we need to do here? And we've since tested every single protein, both raw and cooked values. And what's wild is how different even the supplier is telling you that the macronutrients or the nutritional panels of a certain ingredient are versus when you actually send it to a lab and it goes through that process. So I think on balance, that's done something pretty good for the industry.
I agree entirely. I think it made me reflect on the supplements I take and where I buy them from. And there's a brilliant website which is called Informed Sport, where you can check whether or not your supplements have any banned substances in them if you're a professional athlete or whatever. And because I'm in the army still, I can't take anything which could be like steroids or anything like that. So not that I'd want to, but you should only really take supplements from the informed sport thing, or you might fail a controlled drug test, which they do for you occasionally in the army. So yes, I use that website now.
It's super interesting when you talk about being deployed, and I don't think many of us or anybody really, unless they actually go through that, can really understand what that's like. But tell us a bit about the adjustment when you come back to reality. I mean, is it, back to a completely different routine, I'm guessing, different diet?
It was when I was in Afghanistan. I was there for 7 months, and you do have a 2-week break in the middle. And I came back, and it was so weird using money. Like, it was really
that's
weird.
interesting.
You just literally don't use money. And I remember in Camp Bastion, you had these tokens that you could use, but I was out in a forward operating base or a patrol base, and sometimes also a checkpoint. I kind of went dotted around a few different places, and you just get your ration. And the checkpoints, you get your ration packs, or in your forward operating base, you get the cook will cook you some nice food kind of thing every day. And so I came back, and I remember being like, why would people spend like £4 on a coffee? I was like, this is so stupid. Just make your own coffee. Like I became incredibly tight for a period of time. So money was the weird thing for me.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. It just sounds like you're living in a bubble.
You are.
Yeah, wow. So I know that Effect Doctors, you prescribe GLP-1s. I remember something that really stood out to me is I'm a proponent of them. And I think for people that have been struggling for a long time, or that are pre or with diabetes, that it can be really beneficial. But I remember saying to you a while ago that these drugs are going to change the world, Will. And you turned around and said, Casper, they already have. Tell us a bit about like brands like Ozempic, Manjaro.
GLP receptor agonist.
Agonist, yeah. And, like they and then kind of what are they doing in your body? How are they working? Maybe what the half-life is, how often people take it. And then beyond appetite suppression, what are these drugs doing, in terms of second-order effects and things like that? Because there's obviously been things around addiction, there's been things around Alzheimer's, there's been, I don't know, whatever you're hearing.
GLP-1 receptor agonists were designed, were initially used for diabetic patients to basically reduce their blood glucose levels. They were designed to work by reducing, they mimic gut hormones. They also delay gastric emptying, so you feel fuller for longer. And because of these effects, you eat less and then you lose weight. The effects on the body are that you eat less and it stabilizes blood glucose levels. But then if you don't eat anything, then there's other effects that it has on the body. And one of the things that I find quite interesting is, and also because I prescribe them for patients, I find it quite interesting to discuss with patients how to take them in a safe way that it doesn't screw their body up. Because it's all very well not eating anything at all, or hardly eating anything for months, or just eating very bad food just because it's just whatever is in front of you because you don't want to eat anything. But 3 months later, your hair's going to start falling out, your skin's going to look rubbish, but during it, you're going to have no energy. So it's really important to, if you do take these drugs, eat a high protein diet, or you will devour your own protein, which is your muscle, so you'll lose muscle mass, and then you'll be more prone to injuries. That's one of the reasons why you're downgraded as a military soldier if you're on a GLP-1 agonist, because you will potentially lose more muscle mass, and therefore you're more prone to musculoskeletal injuries. And then in terms of the energy levels, you got to have some glucose, right? Your brain needs glucose, and if you're only working on ketones because you're burning your fat only, etc., then you are going to feel terrible. And I've had a number of patients who are like, I can't do anything. I'm like, are you eating anything? No. Okay, well, I did tell you to eat, but so it's very important to take them in a sensible, guided way, which is the reason why I'm a bit against just like the kind of internet, buy it, whatever, and get whatever dose you want kind of thing, and then that's also the people that end up in hospital because they're like, well, I want to lose lots of weight, I'll go for the biggest dose, and obviously you then might have kind of stomach paralysis and vomiting and nausea, you feel terrible.
Would you say, like, in terms of the negative media around it, would you say that's where most of it's coming from? the people who are misusing it versus actual just side effects that could happen from the drugs?
Look, there are risks with any medication, and there are headline risks with taking these drugs. For example, there is a approximately 1 in 10,000 risk of severe pancreatitis, which is inflammation of the pancreas, which could potentially be life-threatening, etc. So you have to consent patients appropriately. But, as we know, probably in London right now, I mean, I'm completely making this figure up, but I reckon there's like 500,000 people on GLP-1s.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah. How many of them are, on it within the weight guidelines? Probably quite a few of them get it from their personal trainer at the gym who somehow knows someone who, do you know what I mean? And then they start taking dodgy way. And I think those are the people that aren't getting the advice and then take it in the wrong way and then suffer severe, really bad side effects. And then things like, one of the things I don't agree with is like, particularly Ozempic face, like or things like that. That is, if you lose weight, you will lose fat from kind of everywhere. So if you were kind of a puffed out face, then you will have your face will change, but it's not a cause of the medicine per se. It's just you losing fat from kind of all areas of your body, and of course your contours of your face might change, etc. So
the literature, there's a lot there. I think people can Google it, but I'm really interested because I'm interested in some anecdotes because they're always fun. From the patients you've had in your clinic, are you seeing anything outside of fat loss? Like, in real terms, like do you speak to people and they tell you X has happened or X has happened?
Yeah. So I've had a lot of patients come to me from other clinics or patients that have just told me that they've been on it previously and they had really bad hair loss.
Wow.
Hair thinning, hair loss, because if you don't eat properly, then your body will go into a state of stress, and then you'll have telogen effluvia, which is shedding of your hair, and you will lose your hair.
For some positives there, but you've
sorry.
Anything like interesting around these? Like, are these myths that people see reductions in? Some people have reported things like they have given up alcohol and stuff like that.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, sure. So so when you are on Ozempic, Manjaro, etc., these medications, you because you feel fuller for longer. If you drink, you will have a terrible hangover because you will absorb more alcohol because it will stay. It is terrible, and also you're already at a higher risk of reflux, which comes with alcohol and heartburn and nausea, etc. It's worse. So people do drink less. In terms of the positive effects, I've seen really sensible, carefully managed weight loss and people getting exactly what they want, and then careful tapering of the drug in order to maintain that weight loss. And the way I look at it is it's like it's holding your hand in addition to other weight loss modalities. So you are going to not just take this, but you're also going to change your diet and you're also going to exercise more. And then when you come out of it, you don't just suddenly rebound, hopefully.
I think it's 64 or 65% of people eat less after they've been on Manjaro or Ozempic.
Yeah.
So most people are not simply rebounding back to their full fat diet, but they've got some decrease in calories after that.
Yeah.
Kind of switching tact a bit because it's what I think is really cool about a lot of the work you do, and you do so much broad work, and we're going to try to get through as much of it as we can. But obviously a lot of the work in your clinics is around longevity and things like that. So I want to tick off a couple of big ones here, and we'll start with the biggest. What metric or biomarker do you think people should be tracking more closely when it comes to longevity?
It's got to be your VO2 max.
What does it stand for? How does this actually look in the body?
Okay, so basically it's a measure of how much oxygen you take in, transport around, and use during at any stage in your movements, or you can do it at exercise or you can do it at rest. It's mils of O2 per kilogram per minute used, and you measure it by putting a mask on, and then it measures your O2 consumed, your CO2 produced, and your ventilatory and respiratory exchange ratio. Okay,
my Whoop reads out a 52 VO2 max. Why is the Whoop able to give me, what is it, a real number? Is that just a real guess by Whoop? Because I'm obviously not wearing a mask and attaching it to my Whoop.
it would be calculated based upon what you put in on what you did on the treadmill, how far you ran, at what speed, and it would be an estimate. Also, it would put in your height and weight, and it would say, you weigh 100 kilos, you can sprint, on 15 for 20 minutes. You're going to have a high VO2 max, but it's not at all accurate. So one of the things I've just invested in is 2 VO2 max masks for my clients, so that they can use it in the clinic. And we're actually, to start with, just going to do VO2 at rest, but we are probably going to get a bicycle for people to do it on that too. And then you will have this metric that you can track, and that's VO2 max is one of the things. So that's your aerobic fitness, but also if you really want to live for a long time as well, you'll be interested in your anaerobic fitness and your
grip strength.
Exactly. Your weight. You got to do some weight training. So you got to do a bit of aerobic and a bit of anaerobic.
I like that. I think I've read that the VO2 max is the highest corollary to life expectancy, which I guess tracks, because the biggest killer globally is heart disease, right? So good heart, strong heart, oxygen efficiency, long life. Yeah,
there's no shortcut, sadly. You might think that if you buy this pill or you take this injection, that's going to do that. But statistically, what's that actually going to do? Percentage changes or micro points on a percentage change, etc., depending on what it is, etc. But really, stay fit and strong.
Yeah. I've been trying to increase mine, which the program I've got for it is putting yourself in zone 4 and 5 for kind of extended periods, 4, 5, 6 minutes. Absolutely brutal.
That sounds painful.
So it's such a horrible place to be. Right?
But we've both got Whoop, haven't we, Casper? And it's quite fun to sit on the treadmill and look at where you sit on your screen.
Putting it up on the screen and then sitting there.
You can't cheat, really, can you?
For some reason, the difference between 3 and 4 in terms of the zones is absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
Then on to the next one. So you developed the first and only lab for NAD Plus in the UK. And I think there's a big difference between an injectable and a tablet when it comes to NAD Plus in terms of bioavailability. But I'd be really interested if you could just break down a little bit, what is NAD Plus? Why should we care? And then is it better to have an injectable?
Got it. So NAD is one of those things which, after you've optimized your VO2 max and you're doing your weights, etc., and you're really looking for some extra gains.
Up to Calo.
Well, that's true. Your diet, that's essential. It's a cofactor in all of our cells. It's fed into the Krebs cycle, which is how we produce ATP, which is the building block of energy in all of our cells. And as you get older, your NAD levels decline. And so as you get older, your cognition gets worse, your coordination gets worse, your cells turn over more quickly, and that's called cellular senescence. And so the reason why it's mooted as an anti-aging drug is because your cells turn over. It delays turnover less, so it delays cellular senescence. But basically, clients report cognitive improvement. Some clients report better sleep, better energy.
Better skin, anything like that?
Some actually, yes, but it's also not a panacea. It's one of those things where it's a small percentage change, and I personally take it every day, and I notice when I'm not taking it. I do a subcut auto injection. You can take NAD orally. You can take it sublingually. You can take it subcutaneously, or you can take it IV. The problem with if you're taking it orally, or if you're taking it submucosally, the bioavailability is very, very low. It's less than 1%.
Wow. Does that mean oral. You just have to take 100 times of the amount?
Yeah, but then they sell it in 500 milligram tablets, and they still are quite expensive, those. And then one tablet will only give you 5 milligrams. Whereas when I'm injecting subcut, it'll be 50 milligrams or 75 milligrams that I'll take. And I know I'm getting all of it.
You just said orally, and then you said
subcut means under the skin. So I use an auto injector, which is from the company which I helped to found, which is called Veon.
Wow. Is it expensive?
It is, yeah. It's we charge £395 for a starter kit, and then
that's about a month's supply.
That's a month's supply, and then it's if you buy in bulk, about £300 a month.
Wow! But the secret to being a military officer, anaesthetist, father, business owner, entrepreneur is it the NAD plus?
It adds into the cooking pot.
Part of the recipe. Well, the 60th Buxton to go to Harrow, which is incredible. And you got excellent grades there, and you're finishing up high school and you're thinking about what you do next. Why go into medicine?
Well, I really enjoyed human biology, and I really enjoy a challenge. And I thought, wow, medical degree, that would be great. That would be tough. Like, I didn't really think about, what would happen at the end of it. I kind of didn't look into the fact that when you qualify as a doctor age 25, you're earning like £14 an hour or whatever you get as a junior doctor, which they've been striking about. And, and then it takes until you're nearly 40 to become a consultant when you can start to do extra things on the side.
10 years to become a consultant? 8 years?
Yeah, that's a pretty reasonable.
How long did it take you?
It took me, I qualified as a doctor age 25 and I became a consultant when I was 38, so 13 years. But I had to do a general duties medical officer period for 3 years, which was when I went to Afghanistan and lived in Germany for a year and lived in North Yorkshire for a year. And so it kind of delayed my training by a bit. And I also took a year's fellowship in San Francisco doing neuro anesthesia. So I kind of delayed everything a bit by 4 years.
What was grimmer, North Yorkshire or Afghanistan?
San Francisco was actually pretty grim.
Really?
It sounds weird, doesn't it? But I was a fellow there, and I just worked and worked and worked and worked like five. Sorry, a fellow is like the most senior junior doctor in the hospital. So and I was doing like these very long 12-hour days. I put on like 12, 15 kilos when I was there.
Not muscle.
I basically didn't go to the gym. I was so depressed, and when I came back, luckily, I almost immediately got deployed on a deployment that I can't say where with the Special Forces, and I spent 3 months doing, as we called it earlier, Op Massive, and God, you feel different.
Incredible. Okay, yeah, super interesting. Quick question, first of all. Harrow, the bow tie, did you do one every day or did you use a clip bow tie?
You don't wear a bow tie unless you're in the Phil Athletic Club, which I was not in.
I thought so everyone wears a bow tie.
I think they'd be ripped apart for wearing a clip-on bow tie.
Really? Okay.
You shouldn't wear a clip-on bow tie, listeners.
Doing a bit of research about you before this, you've been a Callow customer for a while, but didn't know many details, and so looking up and seeing things like, your great grandfather literally ended slavery in the British Empire, and then your family, I think, pre that and post that had one of or the biggest brewing company in the world. So brought beers to the masses, you could say. And obviously, there's a real lineage across your whole family. I remember speaking to you before this a little bit about your parents. Do you feel a lot of pressure going into the world? Do you have anything to prove? I mean, you do so many things all at once.
At school, in my first few years, was actually kind of very distracted by other things and didn't perform in my first few years. And I think teachers kind of slightly gave up on me. And it got to the GCSE year and I was like, actually, I do want to achieve things. And unfortunately, these exams that we need to do age 16 and 18, they kind of do set your path trajectory in some ways. I know that obviously there's lots of other ways to make it, but where you go to university often will determine, which jobs you can get afterwards, etc. Obviously, that's slightly different in medicine. But and I realized, I got to work seriously hard. So I started to plow then, even though these teachers had given up on me. And I think I had just this single-minded determination to achieve. And I worked really, really hard. And then, passed my exams very, very well, and then got into the top.
And when you say achieve, though, I mean, I kind of like the question of, were you running away from something, or were you running towards something? I mean, were you trying to prove your family and everybody around you that you could live up to that pressure, or were you moving towards trying to fulfill your own potential in your own lane?
I don't think I had pressure from my family, but I felt pressure in myself, and I was definitely out to prove something to everybody around me in my school year, perhaps. And so I worked my socks off to do that.
Proved it to yourself yet?
No.
And just quickly, but you've built a lot of businesses alongside medicine. Most doctors obviously just stick to one path. Why kind of branch out once you'd found some success in medicine?
I saw an opportunity, and I found that opportunity interesting. So I was interested in proactive healthcare and longevity, and I enjoy so many different aspects of what I do within the business.
What are you most excited about for 2026?
I am very excited that we have scheduled the launch of a ketamine infusion service. So ketamine is a very...
This podcast just gets wilder and wilder.
Yeah, it's a very well-known... people use it recreationally, but as an anaesthetist, I use it on, for example, trauma patients because it causes less cardiovascular instability than other drugs that you put patients to sleep with. It's a dissociative amnesic, which means it kind of separates your mind from your body. People talk about going into the K-hole. You just kind of, it's like an out-of-body experience. And there is heavy scientific evidence that it decreases the risk of suicide in people with severe depression. And people see very, very improved scoring systems, their score on their depression score. It's also used for PTSD. It's also used for certain chronic pain conditions. So basically what you do is you have patients come in and they'd have a ketamine infusion, probably a quarter of the anesthetic dose that you'd give, but more than the analgesic pain-killing dose that you give. And you kind of put people into a medically supervised, inverted commas, K-hole for them to process their issues. And you go through therapy with them afterwards and talk about it. And I'm excited about how we can help some people in some difficult situations with that.
Incredible. Seems like a really fast-growing space, but very much in the US right now more than the UK.
Yeah, 100%.
Amazing. Great, you're bringing that here. So you've been a Keller customer for a while. Had the most amazing voice note. I think we've got to clip it over the top of this or something. But it was one of those. I hate voice notes if I'm really honest.
Yeah, so do I.
So every time I get one, I'm like, I'm glad this was convenient for you to send.
I think I apologize.
I think you opened it apologizing.
Hey man, I imagine you hate voicemails as much as I hate voicemails. So I'm so sorry for leaving you one. I'm an absolute dick. Mate, I just want to say it's like 2 weeks into Kalo and it's amazing. It's an incredible service. It's just so brilliant. The food's fantastic. Super impressed by the delivery.
If we took Kalo away, next week, what do you think is the biggest thing you'd lose?
Nutritional value. I mean, you guys provide really solid, delicious meals, and it doesn't cost me any more than what I was spending in my hospital's Marks and Spencer every day. So I get 5 meals a week.
Yeah. What's your favorite meal at Kalo so far?
Hands down, steak and sweet potato chips.
It's a good one. Really, really good one. I think we're getting better and better with the beef. We've been switching between a bavette, a rump steak. We're looking at a fillet steak now for the premium meals. So we really want to build on that dish because more and more people love it, but I think it could always be better. I think that dish today is probably an 8.5 out of 10. I think it could be a 10 out of 10 with a couple of more tweaks. I want to see those sweet potato chips are roasted a little bit more. So we're working on oven temperatures, dryness in the oven, because you really want that caramelization to come out of the sweet potato. And then on the steak, we've got a premium version coming out with fillet beef, grass-fed from the UK. And then we're playing around with bavette and rump on the existing one, and even experimenting with sous videing the beef after it's been grilled, because it comes really nicely the next day when you have to heat it up, because it keeps a lot of the water content in the beef when you sous vide it, rather than that leaking out when you roast it. And so, that really helps if you're microwaving it or oven roasting it, reheating the next day. So things are coming on that dish, so expect it to be at a 10 very soon.
I can see the professional chef coming out of you there.
Yeah, well, I just get really excited about these things, particularly because we're building, we're creating, like you say, and at the same time, the customer is receiving. And, we're one of those businesses where we touch the customer every day. And there's far few of those. There's not many of those at all. You're an entrepreneur. You run businesses. You've been in management positions. If you had my job, what's the first thing you'd change at Callow?
Wow, that's a hard question.
Give me some advice.
I mean, there's one other thing that I add to my lunchbox every single day, and that's like a piece of fruit. And that means I have to go and buy that piece of fruit. And maybe you might consider adding a piece of fruit, or the option where you could buy a piece of fruit for £1 or whatever extra to add to your meal. And then I get my pear or my orange or whatever, and I think that's a low kind of, I don't think it would be much work for you guys to put that in, and you might make a bit more revenue.
I actually honestly love that. We've got a partnership with Natura, who are the kind of like, Gucci of vegetables coming out at the moment. We're working on some premium meals with them, but I actually think like a seasonal piece of fruit. Would you want to pick what the piece of fruit is, or would you let us choose based on the seasons?
Personally, I'd let you choose to spice it up.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. I'd really like that. I think we're going to steal that. Maybe we can clip this into new product launch background. How did we get here? If you could go back and tell 25-year-old Will one thing about life, health, and what really matters, what would it be?
You got to make time for your friends. So I would say the value of friendships and relationships, and on also your health, the endorphins you get, the dopamine hit, the serotonin hit, the way it lowers your blood pressure, being around people who care about you. I would say invest in friendships.
I think that's amazing. Obviously, working in a hospital and you're putting people under, whether it's, is your speciality within anaesthetist around the brain?
Yes, I'm a neuroanaesthetist.
Could you just describe that quickly?
So I'm the anaesthetist for operations of the spine and brain in general. I do general anesthesia as well, but I do
most common
neuro.
Things that you see come through.
Sadly, brain tumors, cutting out epileptic foci, operations on the spine, multiple different types of operations on the spine.
Wow. And you've watched some people in their final moments, I'm guessing, and I'm really curious. What do they talk about? What do they regret?
The one anecdote I will tell you is there was a 95-year-old lady when I was a first-year junior doctor who I was examining her abdomen, and she said, "Are you going to get into bed with me?" And I said, "No, madam, I'm your doctor." And she said, "Oh, back when I was a younger woman, young men would want to get into bed with me." She said, I wish I'd been with more young men."
On that note, Will, you have been an absolutely fascinating guest. I think we've really up-leveled the information today, and I hope a lot of people listen to this maybe a couple of times to really absorb everything you've shared with us. And I hope some people find you at Effect Doctors in the months to come. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.